Tonight, Republicans across the country still beaming from their party's big win in D.C. Voters across America here have spoken, and they have said that the GOP will control both the House and the U.S. Senate. What this victory could mean for Obama's final 2 years in office. And closer to home, New York voters keeping Governor Andrew Cuomo on the job for 4 more years. Cuomo's election win didn't come without controversy, though, while the governor is being criticized once again. And we also dive into the race for governor in Connecticut, where Governor Malloy came in first place by the skin of his teeth. Plus, recreational marijuana, it is being legalized in Oregon as well as our nation's capital. We'll have a look at that and other ballot initiatives that voters weighed in on in the midterm elections. Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, tonight, the Republicans, they have the Hill. The party gaining control of the Senate and retaining control of the House. In fact, increasing the margin there as well. Tonight, we'll take a look at the outcomes of the national as well as local and regional races. But we begin in D.C., where some are preparing to face new realities. Senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman, he has more.
President Obama did not sugarcoat it.
Obviously, Republicans had a good night, and they deserve credit for running good campaigns.
While Republicans declared a decisive, sweeping victory.
We won in red states, we won in blue states, and we won in purple states.
Republicans picked up 7 Senate seats last night, more than they needed to claim the majority. And that number could go up. There are still 3 races that are too close to call. Kentucky Republican Mitch McConnell is now poised to be the new Senate Majority Leader. Today, he said, he'll try to work with President Obama.
The American people have spoken. They've given us divided government. The question for both the President and for the Speaker and myself and our members is, what are you going to do with it?
The Republican tidal wave didn't just sweep the Senate. The GOP held on to win key governor's races, even in typically Democratic strongholds like Maine, Massachusetts, and Maryland. And they expanded their majority in the House, giving them their biggest advantage there since Herbert Hoover was president. New Jersey Republican Governor Chris Christie aggressively campaigned for candidates across the nation.
The president took a beating last night.
But some analysts say Republicans should not read last night's results as a mandate.
It was a rejection of the president, and it was a rejection of the politics that's been practiced the last couple of years in Washington, D.C.
Well, today, the president announced that he wants to meet with congressional leaders at the White House this Friday. President saying that they got an obligation to work together on issues where they agree. The trick is, where do they agree? Now, I want you to take a look at what Congress looks like following last night's election. The GOP, 248 seats, while the Democrats hold 187. And as we speak, Republicans have 52 Senate seats. The Dems have 45. Independents, 2 here. Republicans also leading the way in gubernatorial races across the country. 31 states now have Republican governors, while 18 have Democrats heading things up, and just 1 state being led by an independent. And some of those Republican wins, they came as complete shockers. Nobody here at the table saw some of these things coming. In President Obama's home state of Illinois, where he and Michelle Obama campaigned on numerous occasions, one of the few places where they will welcome this election season, Illinois found Republican Bruce Rauner the winner as he beat back Democratic Governor Pat Quinn, a vocal supporter of the president, and the president who both raised money and put in investment did not see this pay off for Mr. Quinn last night. In Maryland, Republican Larry Hogan also shocked many, beating out Democratic Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown. This after Governor Martin O'Malley had to sit this race out due to term limits. And Republican Charles Baker, he beat Democrat Martha Coakley in Massachusetts. Nobody saw this happening. Voters in Maine also in New England going for Republican, re-electing Republican Governor Paul LePage. A lot of people thought he was very vulnerable last night. And then to Kansas, where Republican Governor Sam Brownback, he won another term, and people had him down by as many as 20 points with a week out to go in this race. Exit polls from all across America show that most voters, they are tired of the political headaches coming out of Washington. Just 2 in 10 voters trust that the government will do what's right all or most of the time, and they're also tired of the president. 54% of voters disapprove of the job that President Obama is doing, while 44% approve of his work. And the economy, definitively the most important issue for voters. Half of them saying that they believe the economy will be much worse for the next generation. And nearly 3 in 4 Americans also said that they worry about a major terrorist attack on American soil. Half of them approving of the Fed's handling of the Ebola crisis, and 47% think Obamacare went too far. And another little piece of snapshot information here, most voters, they decided to skip hitting the polls altogether on Election Day last night. Turnout reached its lowest level since back in 1942. Talk about the satisfaction of the electorate. All right, I want to bring in our panel right now, Dominic Carter, who is at headquarters down at the Sheraton for all the big statewide Democrats. A political journalist and author is Dominic, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent, who's pointing at Dominic for no good reason.
Nice work.
So we'll get to the drama that was the Sheraton last night. It made for some good political theater, and also what lies ahead in Albany. We'll be joined on the set here by Ed Cox, the Republican Party chairman, who's got a mixed bag, I think, from last night, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's start in Washington. I'll ask you guys kind of the same question, but in different ways. What do you think people voted for last night? Not against. What did they vote for?
I think they voted for change. I think there's a certain amount of frustration, dissatisfaction with Washington, and I think they just voted to change the status quo. And with President Obama at the head of that matrix, voting against President Obama became the change that they were looking for. Though I want to point out a caveat, and that is, so few of them voted. And I think that's another part of that's frustration. Part of this is the Democrats' longstanding problem of getting its base out to the polls in midterm elections. Last night's electorate, vastly older, so many more people over 65, so many fewer people under 30 came to the polls last night. The Democratic voters that the party needs and that it gets on presidential election years, they weren't there last night, and Democrats have to figure out a way to change.
And to that point, Andrew, some interesting exit polling information we learned as to who voted last night. 3/4 of the electorate that voted last night was white. Of that, skewing definitely older. Young people stayed home in big numbers. Implicit in the number in terms of who voted by race here, blacks and minorities, they didn't feel either compelled to get out to vote last night, or they felt that they were ignored. Latinos, certainly on the immigration issue, they said we've been promised this now for 3 election cycles. We still haven't seen this. And African Americans, frankly, they were being asked in the 11th hour to come out and really turn out and vote for the president, when a lot of them thought that they were ignored for the majority of it. So I asked Andrew what they voted for, but what was last night a vote against? Because they don't love Republicans either. You go dig into these numbers, the exit polls, they blame Republicans just as much as Democrats.
Almost as much.
But do you think that basically it's, well, we pox on both their houses, but if the president's Democrat, we'll punish the other one?
Yes, there's some historical significance.
Up your mind.
There is some historical significance to that. But what they voted against, if what you're asking me directly, Richard, there's no way around this. They voted against President Obama among those that actually turned out to vote. Mr. Obama was not on the ballot, but in all effect, he was on the ballot. The turnout reflected a non-presidential year, given a midterm election, but this was a vote, whether it's right or wrong. And, one thing I will say, the Democratic base, don't complain a year from now because you didn't turn out and vote. And now, you can say it wasn't a mandate, you could say it wasn't a wave, but that depends on definition.
Another thing that came out, it kind of amplifies Dominic's point, but also it speaks to how fluid this thing was. Consultants, campaign managers across the country, red, blue, purple states, whatever, they said on the Republican side that about a month ago, when the president in effect said that they didn't have a strategy for ISIS or they didn't have a strategy for Ebola,
Huge mistake.
They said they didn't even, they underestimated how much of an impact they had on the electorate. The electorate was fed up and tired and everything, but they didn't seem that they were picking sides. Once they heard that, it amplified all the arguments Republicans were making that the government didn't have its act together and they didn't have it. It might be a cute anecdote, Andrew, but there's something to it. It just kind of, if they didn't know which way to go, they went there. And I think we saw that in Kansas for the governor's race. I think we saw that in Massachusetts for the governor's race. We certainly saw it in some House and Senate races as well.
I'm not sure if that just didn't exacerbate or extend the trends that were already in place.
I think we're saying the same thing, but I think it just tipped it was a tipping point for a bunch of them.
I think so, and it certainly shifted some of the focus off of people who looked at Congress and said, well, that's the gang that can't shoot straight, and sort of made some people think about the White House as the gang that can't shoot straight. That may have also impacted turnout and helping to depress some of the Democratic turnout that we were talking about
I
before.
asked you last week, both you guys, or this past week, first guess it, will Democrats regret not empowering the president to be a big part of it, or did they say, hey, we lost, it would have been even worse if the president was the face of my campaign? Which one?
I think they think it would have been worse if the president had been the face of their
They
campaign.
definitely believe
Even
that
the
it
day
would have
after.
been worse. Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
So tonight, what we're going to do, and our guests as well here, is we're going to focus on what happened yesterday. We're going to try and do a post-mortem. Tomorrow, we're going to get into where we go from here. And as always, we bring you into our program as well. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and answer our question here tonight. Why were the Republicans last night's big winners? Was it policy? Was it politics? Was it just a vote against the president? As Dominic said, why did Republicans at the end, at every level, win so big last night? When we come back, we'll have much more on a look back at election night last night.